This episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations is sponsored by MYOB Acumatica, cloud ERP software designed to help Australian manufacturers streamline operations, boost productivity, and manage everything from finance to supply chain, all in one flexible platform. Bruce, thank you very much for joining us here on AU Manufacturing Conversations. It's wonderful to finally have you on the program.
Thank you, Brent. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you again.
So let's get started, Bruce, by you telling us a little about yourself, please, and your background.
I've been working within the ERP sector for around about 23 years now and working for multiple enterprise level technology providers, and some global and some local, such as MYOB, who I work with today. But my career has pretty much spanned, roles primarily across product management and product marketing, but starting out in finance and accounting roles, then, migrated towards a career in technology where I held positions in, solution engineering and business development. But one aspect, I guess, that's remained throughout has been a really strong focus on manufacturing here in Australia and a willingness to see it recover and succeed. And I say willingness to recover because obviously over the last 20 years we've witnessed the sector's share of GDP and employment steadily decline, but with that we've sort of witnessed the impacts of globalization, the good and the bad that it's brought, and with high labour costs and the high Australian dollar post that mining boom, which led to offshoring and challenges with competitiveness. So there's been a lot of change over the last 2 decades, as it were. And on a personal level, my family, who were small business owners themselves, supplying mechanical components for forklifts, and were directly impacted by closures in the domestic car manufacturing industry that we can recollect, with the first being the Ford Geelong factory in 2016. Then the same year, we've got the Holden engine production in Australia ended with the closure of the Fisherman's Bend plant in Port Melbourne. And then, of course, Toyota, including its Altona plant, shortly thereafter in October 2017. So massive disruption. These were my family's biggest customers, and these events had a really significant impact across the supply chain of small and medium-sized enterprises that really supported these flagship companies. But rather than marking the end of manufacturing, it actually marked a bit of a transition period where industry gradually shifted from, say, mass production to advanced manufacturing. And, examples of that we can see within medical device manufacturing, aerospace and research, defense and food processing and the like, where investment focused more on things like innovation and, R&D and customization rather than simply volume. So it's been a pretty disruptive period in the industry over those last 20 years. But, obviously with that, there's plenty of green shoots that indicate opportunity for the sector in the medium to longer term too. So that's a bit about myself and a bit about the last 20 years of manufacturing.
I'm obviously keen on your point of view. That's why you're here, and thanks for sharing it. To continue with some of your observations, what do you want to say about the industrial structure in Australia and some of its strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, look, that transformation I spoke of is really an evolution of a sector that's moving away from that traditional large-scale manufacturing model towards more advanced and more specialised and high value-added production and engineering. We've got here in Australia a very vast ecosystem of expertise across this sector, more specialised and more innovation-driven sector as it is today. But of course, with that, it faces challenges such as high costs and limited ability to scale effectively and efficiently. But overall, I'd say some of our strengths are our reputation for product quality, the safety and reliability of the products that we produce. And there's a huge global demand for Australian-made food, for Australian-made pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Other strengths we see are in innovation and R&D, where government support through programs like the Modern Manufacturing Strategy, industry growth centres and CSIRO collaborations are driving really, really great outcomes. And along with that, we've got great access to Asia Pacific markets, and that's a key strength for us geographically. And that's supported by, strategic trade agreements, the ASEAN FTAs, along with others, where these mean that we're really well positioned to export to, rapidly growing economies in this Asia region. And all that said, of course, there are weaknesses and challenges we need to consider around labour and energy and compliance costs that are, in fact, among the highest in the OECD, which, of course, that makes it difficult to compete on price, mass producers in Asia. And there's challenges, of course, relating to fragmentation and scale. So many manufacturers are small and many are undercapitalized, and that limits productivity. It has an effect on innovation and also has an effect on their export readiness. And just to name a few, there's low economies of scale compared to international counterparts that can scale quickly and generate capital. There's also a heavy import reliance for components and, of course, capital equipment, and a vulnerable and limited domestic supply chain as well. And that was certainly a problem that was highlighted during the pandemic. But I guess the biggest challenge, I'd say, here is around skills shortages around key areas like robotics and data analytics. And that's a problem that's exacerbated by, aging workforce, where many aren't necessarily willing to upskill into these areas later in their career. So the question there becomes more around how we best harness young talent as they come through uni or TAFE or through other means. But more importantly, how do we incentivize them to stay within the manufacturing sector so that we keep those vital skills that we need?
Right. Does any of what you've said, some of the characteristics of our industry in Australia, fragmentation, scale, skills shortages, all the other things we're quite familiar with, would you like to expand and say what any of this means for productivity, which is obviously a very prominent topic nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. So unlocking productivity here in the Australian manufacturing sector is really about overcoming fragmented systems and manual workflows, because according to the discussions that we have within that sector, with our customers in that sector, these remain significant barriers to productivity. And that results obviously in double handling of information, inefficiencies there, and that results also in limited visibility across entire operations, of course. So the Australian manufacturing sector continues to lag a little behind global peers, and that's in part due to an underinvestment in digital and automated technologies. So improving productivity here starts with reimagining core processes and implementing integrated platforms like enterprise resource planning systems, ERP systems. So these types of systems provide real-time insights. They streamline core workflows, and they also embed AI tools to help eliminate operational silos and allow managers to manage by exception as well. So with that, obviously, cloud-based ERP solutions like the one I represent, being MYOB Acumatica, these systems here are designed to automate those routine tasks. They provide instant access to critical information and data, and enable a faster, more informed decision-making process across the business. So productivity there is not just about speed, it's about removing friction throughout key workflows. And the less time teams spend on chasing paperwork and reconciling spreadsheets or navigating disconnected systems, the more time that they can focus on innovation and value-adding activities. With that in mind, even small improvements, like examples where you can automate purchase approvals and create approval workflows, where you can also introduce anomaly detection within a business to surface erroneous data or irregular data, and also aspects of AP automation, or even improving inventory planning and replenishment routines. So these incremental changes can drive significant gains in efficiency and performance.
On a slightly different note, I wanted to ask you about a recently published report by MYOB, The Bigger Picture. What are some of the things that it uncovered about mid-sized businesses in Australia?
It's certainly an interesting exercise, and it very much confirmed the view that mid-sized businesses are vital. They are high-performing contributors to our Australian economy. From the data, they actually punch well above their weight across many areas, and they consistently outperform in productivity growth and are rapidly increasing their share of national business R&D investment. And despite facing the challenges I spoke of before, such as adopting digital tools and skills shortages and rising cost pressures and the like, these mid-sized businesses are very much leading the way in investment in innovation. So their ability to embrace and adopt new technologies will be indeed critical in driving future growth, future export growth to that end, and maintaining Australia's global competitiveness. Their impact is very significant. So mid-sized businesses, and we classify mid-sized businesses as having between 20 and 500 full-time employees, or between, say, 5 and 200 million in annual revenues. If you look at the stats, they only make up 3% of all Australian business entities, yet they in fact deliver around 30% of private sector gross value and employment. So their contribution is enormous considering their size.
Right. Well, the topic of today is scaling sustainably, and I'd like to know from you some things about pursuing growth and scaling. And does this always involve export markets based on the companies you've spoken to?
Yeah, look, mid-sized businesses, whilst they're often lumped together with smaller business and they're very much eclipsed by larger businesses, they're very different from either of these segments, and they have a really special role to play in our economy. And their role is very much the one of a connector. The way to think about it is that mid-sized businesses are the influencers of our economy, as it were, because of their role as a connector in many supply chains. They're linking businesses to businesses across their industry networks. And because they push smaller businesses and larger enterprises to adopt new technologies as well. So to that end, they're critical in diffusing new technology right across the economy. So a thriving mid-market reinforces the entire manufacturing ecosystem, enhancing its resilience and agility and obviously its global competitiveness as well. So naturally, helping these smaller businesses scale into mid-tier really strengthens our supply chain. And it also serves to support talent retention and delivers broader economic benefits beyond that as well. But mid-sized businesses, they often act as regional anchors, and these firms create local jobs. They invest in workforce development and uplift smaller suppliers. And by doing so, they help elevate an entire sector. And you mentioned also there around ways that these companies can pursue growth, and does growth and exports have to go together and so on. Traditionally, key growth levers for manufacturers include expanding product lines, improving operational processes, and entering new domestic or international markets, and embracing digital transformation, of course. But exporting itself can significantly accelerate growth. Success clearly begins here within region at home with optimized local operations and systems capable of handling increased complexity and scale. So digital maturity and system integration are almost always prerequisites for exporting manufacturers. And to that end, export-ready businesses typically invest more in technology and integrated platforms to meet those heightened demands of international trade, be it from compliance and traceability to fulfillment and logistics. So if your internal systems are already under pressure, scaling up will only amplify those issues. So addressing system gaps before expanding ensures a much smoother, more sustainable path to growth. And these are challenges we help solve for our customers every day here at MYOB, because with solutions like Acumatica, they provide that robust foundation to support efficiency and compliance and agility that allows manufacturers to move into those new markets.
Right. I wanted to learn from you about growing pains, which are something that regularly come up when you're speaking to scale-up companies. What are some things that people can keep in mind to avoid those when they're increasing in size?
Yeah, interesting question. So look, as businesses grow, those outdated and disconnected systems really quickly become barriers to that growth. And that's evident in the discussions that we have with our customers. And so manual processes and those rigid platforms from legacy systems often fail to keep pace with that rising demand. And with that comes operational complexity. And with that also comes evolving compliance requirements. And common red flags that we see include data errors. We have customers missing deadlines in deliveries. We've got a heavy reliance on spreadsheets. and limited visibility of any key metric for that matter, and for decision makers in businesses. So proactively reviewing and upgrading core systems really helps eliminate those bottlenecks before they start to impact performance. So it's always really important to, in reviewing this, to involve frontline teams in that process. Those teams, they often uncover inefficiencies that leadership might overlook. So it's really essential to regularly assess whether your systems are still fit for purpose as your business scales. So regular system and process reviews are really, really important to ensure that, and like a health check of sorts. And you schedule these to ensure that your business tools are constantly evolving alongside your business rather than hampering it.
Right. Well, I'm sure you're in no hurry to share disaster stories, naming clients, because obviously that would be bad for them and bad for you. But are there any kinds of, examples of getting it wrong that might be illustrative that you might want to share for the purposes of this conversation?
Yeah, of course, yes. I'm not naming any names. Look, one fast-growing manufacturer that we know of relied on paper-based inventory processes despite a huge surge in orders due to the introduction of a new product line. And that resulted in stock outs, missed shipments. There was a high frequency of errors. And this eventually led to reputational damage. And ultimately, they lost a major contract due to reliability concerns. They also had to write off tens of thousands of dollars of obsolete stock because they had no clear visibility into what was on hand and where it was located. So that's an unfortunate situation, but an example, I guess, of getting it right is a customer of ours in the medtech sector. They were running an old on-premise solution, and they recognized early that the legacy systems that they were using were really limiting their ability to grow internationally. They had big ambitions to scale, and so ultimately they migrated to MYOB Acumatica manufacturing, and that allowed them to centralize their operations, and it gave their users real-time access across their global team into the system from that day of go live. So the result here unified their finance, their manufacturing onto a single platform. It boosted data accuracy and operational efficiency, and automated multi-currency transactions and improved compliance, and that eased that path to their global market. They also integrated Acumatica with other third-party platforms via an open API that allowed them to streamline workflows and enhance collaboration across other teams. So they gained a $10,000 a year savings on server costs and around 60 plus hours a month in administration savings. And this was the case, especially in areas like month-end close and the accounts receivable and accounts payable departments. And ultimately, this helped them improve visibility into product quality, helped operational performance, and financials, and empowering, smarter and faster decisions. And that freed up teams to focus on strategic growth rather than a manual admin, and turning potential scaling challenges into more of a competitive advantage.
So that's a bit about growth gone wrong and growth gone right. Before we end the conversation, would you like to share any info about scaling up and self-assessment that listeners might be able to learn from?
Yeah, indeed. So look, with that, you're talking about scaling, you need to assess whether or not, first of all, your business is ready to scale. And, you can start with a simple self-check to understand readiness, as it were. So recurring errors or missed deadlines commonplace throughout your key workflows. So also, do managers lack real-time visibility into performance? Can they access metrics quickly and instantly and be able to drill down through into source data if they ever need to? Things like manual workarounds, are they the norm? Are they filling gaps in workflows where you could, in theory, employ automation? Is your data centralized? Is it reliable? Is it up to date? Are you having to manually transfer data from one system to another, which creates the opportunity for errors and so on? And you evaluate your systems. Are your core platforms scalable enough to manage that growth? Can your teams access real-time reporting across departments, whether it be through drawing down on static reports or through dashboards? So they're just some, but if you've answered no to any of these, it might be time to reassess your systems and streamline processes and explore automation. We encourage leadership to regularly pause and review whether goals, people, processes, and technology remain aligned, and address gaps before growth magnifies them, of course. And proactive improvements are far less costly than reactive fixes, of course. So it's always important to remain proactive in that respect. Even asking a simple question like, what would break if our order volume doubled overnight? And simply by assessing that question, you can start to uncover hidden risks and opportunities for improvement throughout those workflows and departments. But ultimately, you can start small here. Pick one bottleneck, pick one manual task or one gap in visibility to solve in a quarter. Make it a sprint. Small wins, they build momentum, but ultimately together they fuel sustainable growth.
Well, that's about everything I wanted to ask you, Bruce. So thanks very much for joining us on AU Manufacturing Conversations. Great to catch up with you today.
Absolute pleasure, Brent. Thank you very much for the opportunity.